Hey everybody, Melissa Simonson here, and I'm super excited for this week's episode of Amaze on Stream because I have the amazing, the awesome Ben Leonard. Ben, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited to introduce everybody to you and talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. And actually, I'm really curious to hear, sort of your progression myself. So why don't we dive straight in? And
Sure.
I would love to know, is this something that your parents, were they also entrepreneurs? Is this something that runs in your family, or was this out of the norm for your family?
Entrepreneurship skipped a generation.
Okay.
My grandparents were. So on my mother's side, my grandparents, so my grandfather, after the Second World War, he went to, so he was he was overseas in the Second World War, was in India where he met my grandmother.
Right.
She came back to the UK with him, and he went to work as a salesman. But then he got the entrepreneurial itch, and together they set up two shops or stores. One was a sports shop, so selling soccer, cricket, rugby equipment, that kind of thing, and the other was a toy shop. And so he used to go to the toy trade fairs and all that kind of thing. Skipped a generation. Both my parents studied geology, and so became geologists. And then on my dad's side, his dad, who I never met, he died before I was born. He was an entrepreneur, I guess. He had his own businesses, multiple, from whether he had removals firms, he had a garage, that kind of thing. So yeah, it skipped a generation, but it finally turned up in me, but not for a long time. I didn't know I was going to be an entrepreneur until I was almost 30.
Yeah. So how did that progress then? When you first, kind of struck out, just as an adult and like getting your first jobs and stuff, what kind of jobs did you get?
Me, yeah. So, well, I went to university to study zoology. So I'm a total
Oh
like,
my goodness.
I'm a total animal and wildlife nerd.
I love it.
Yeah. So I studied zoology, and
Did
in my
you
final.
did you have like a specific animal that you wanted to work with? Like, were you like, I want to work with koalas? Like, this is my dream.
Yes, that was me. So in my final year, I specialized in marine mammals. So I'm the whale and dolphin nerd guy.
Gotcha.
And I watched Free Willy a lot of times when I was a kid. and so then I did that with my undergrad, and then my master's was similar. It was ecology. And I live in a little corner of Scotland where oil and gas, offshore oil and gas, is a huge industry. So I ended up working in that industry as the token tree hugger in the room, telling the engineers that they're not allowed to throw chemicals in the sea. So I was not an entrepreneur until I stumbled into e-commerce, and then I discovered this entrepreneurial spark, which I'm still burning through now.
So tell me then how that went. So you're in this sort of job where you're kind of giving recommendations to people who don't really want to hear that type of recommendation. And so then you go from there to entrepreneurship. What was it, watching a friend? Was it like having a brilliant idea for some product that was needed in the world?
So a lot of people, when they move from a day job to entrepreneurship, they hate their day job. I was very fortunate. I did not hate my day job. I liked my job. I liked the people I worked with. Something significant happened to me. I got sick with a heart problem 3 times.
Oh, wow.
And the third time, they basically said this could become chronic and life-changing if we don't really nip this in the bud. So take all of the drugs, and we're going to sign you off of work, and you got to stop doing all your fitness hobbies. No more boxing, no more CrossFit, no more running around like a maniac.
Yeah.
I'm fine now.
Good.
And I'm doing all those things again. But I had to take some time out. My wife, then my girlfriend, was studying. So she was super busy. And I'd had this idea a couple of years previously, which I just sat and had done nothing about. I'd been training at CrossFit with some friends. And at the end of the session, somebody said, "Oh, we beasted it today." And I kind of said to myself, "We beasted it today. Beast Gear. That would be a cool name for a fitness brand." And then, I forgot all about it.
Of
course. until like 2 years later, I'm sick. I can't train. I'm sadly tidying out my gym gear. I'm looking at this equipment and I'm thinking, I could do a better job of that. Oh yeah, I had that idea called Beast Gear for a fitness brand. Oh, I'll do a fitness brand, right? I needed a hobby. It was something to do that might make me some extra pocket money and might just get me some cool sort of personalized products of my own, if you like, whilst I figured out this little project of mine.
Yeah.
Turned out I was pretty good at it. And so I ended up working that as a side hustle once I'd returned to work. And then eventually I quit my job, focused on it. And after 3.5 years of running that business, I sold it.
Yeah.
So it was quite a journey.
So tell me a little bit about that exit. Like, you don't have to go into a ton of details if you don't want, but I know that's it's a big burning question for a lot of people. Like, sure. Is this the right time? Is this, is my business in the right position for this? So how did you answer all those questions for yourself and get to the point where you're like, this is the right time. This is the right thing for my business,
So exits are a huge topic right now.
Yeah.
And the environment back then was very different. I started my business in 2016. I sold it in late 2019. And it was early 2019 when I'd begun to hear whispers in the on the e-commerce grapevine that a bunch of money was coming into the space, and that buying and selling e-commerce businesses was soon to be a bit more mainstream than it had been until then. And after doing a few sort of back of an envelope rough calculations for myself, I came to realize, I'm sitting on a pretty valuable asset here.
Yeah.
And my wife was pregnant. We wanted to move house. And I came to realize that the amount of risk tied up in the business based on because so much of the revenue is coming from one place, Amazon. I decided that based on where we were in our lives, exploring the idea of selling the business was worthwhile, because potentially it could set us up for life, take a bunch of risk off the table, and give me the freedom to try something new.
Right.
And so I did explore that, and come late 2019, I had sold the business. And I can talk a little bit about it because the buyer, which I can say, Thrasio, uses me in a bunch of their PR. So I think my business was their first British acquisition. And that was nice. Late 2019. Yeah, late 2019, right before the explosion in mergers and acquisitions as we know it now. And yeah, it was a wild ride for 3.5 years, and I'm still in e-commerce now. I'm still building brands, and I'm still involved in exits, and we can talk about that in a bit if you want. But yeah, it was the right thing for us and our family at the time.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing is, at first, each of these moments that we've talked about so far, you have to kind of decide, is this the right thing for me? Is this what I want? Is this the right thing for my family? What effect is this going to have on the people around me and on myself? And so what do you think? Like, tell me a little bit about when you started this entrepreneurial thing, you had this idea for the product and stuff. Did your immediate family, were they very supportive of this because of the health struggles you were going through, and this was sort of an alternative, or how did that?
Yeah, they totally were. Yeah, they really were. So my wife thought it was a cool idea because she knew I needed something to occupy my time and my mind.
Right.
And a project. And I think, because she was spending a ton of time in the university library, I think she kind of felt kind of guilty, like, oh, well, at least this will distract Ben and give him something to do. And then my parents, I think, they thought it was pretty cool. They're like, oh, the entrepreneurial spark has skipped a generation, but this is pretty sweet, right? And they knew that I'd been having a tough time, and so they were pleased that I had discovered something that was getting me excited.
That's so good. So okay, good. Here's the biggest question of all.
Sure.
Now that you're doing e-commerce stuff, and you've gone through an exit, and you're still remaining involved in some different brands and things like that, how do you get your fix for the marine wildlife and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I guess there's two parts to that. I still get it in an amateur kind of way. I'm very interested in conservation topics, particularly rewilding. I live on a coastal town, and I go paddleboarding quite frequently, and we see dolphins almost every time we go paddleboarding. It's great. And seals and all sorts of wildlife. And I feel like I've discovered this sort of, I like to think of it like almost like a fuse, like an entrepreneurial fuse. And I've got to burn through it for probably a decade and do what I've got to do, which is, I've sold the first brand. I'm building some more brands. I want to exit those. I'm now doing ecom brokers. We'll see where we go with that. And then at some point, I want to get back into the conservation side of things and the rewilding side of things. And having, I almost had a career in academia. After my master's, I nearly did a PhD. I'm glad I didn't. But in academia, there's a ton of smart people. And a lot of those guys end up in the NGOs and the charities trying to push conservation, rewilding, that type of thing. Right. They're all really smart and really well-intentioned, but they don't get shit done.
Right.
And I think you oftentimes need a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit applied to what they're trying to do to actually make stuff happen. And I don't know, I have no idea how it's going to look yet, of course, and I'm not worrying about that yet because I'm all about just-in-time learning.
Yeah.
But when that time comes that I've burnt through this entrepreneurial spark, I've got a few exits under my belt and I'm kind of like, cool, I've done that. Taken all the money off the table, all good. Let's go back to this side of things where I have built up a whole bunch more experience. I can then apply some entrepreneurial spirit, some business thinking to some of those passions and see where that goes.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
That's amazing. Yeah.
So I can't do it all now, but I know that I can do it a bit more in the future.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, though. I think it's one of those things where it's like, entrepreneurs are the stuff that makes the world go round. This is how things get done. It's how things happen. And the more entrepreneurs there are in the world, the better the world is, in my opinion, because, it's just, they're doers. Entrepreneurs are doers. So the more of us there are, the better the whole world is.
Pretty much. I mean, like, for example, I don't know if you've heard of a beer company called Brewdog. Okay, so they're pretty huge now. They're worth billions. They are from my local hometown, which is about 40 miles north of where I am now. They've had some negative press recently, but putting that aside, they've just purchased a vast area of wilderness in the Scottish Highlands, which is, for all intents and purposes, a desolate wasteland, which has been mismanaged for probably hundreds of years.
Wow.
And just because they can. And they're going to rewild it and regrow the ancient Caledonian pine forest, which has pretty much disappeared because they can. And yeah, there'll be a commercial side to it. They're going to have holiday homes and stuff that people can come and rent and all that type of thing. Sure. But the fact of the matter is that sometimes you just need money and a business brain to get stuff done. And so the fact that is being done in topics that I'm interested in, I find pretty inspiring. So yeah, I'm going to burn through the entrepreneurial thing and then I'll get back into those passions later. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely can see you've got some different passions in you. I'd love to see it. This is why I love talking to entrepreneurs about, what feeds them, what drives them, and how they do their day-to-day and what they're getting out of it, because it is very clear to see, people who are living life with passion. So I'd love to see that. So one of the things I want to know, if you don't mind, is, sure. So when you were growing up, did you have siblings as well?
Yeah, one older brother.
One older brother. And is he entrepreneurial, or it just kind of happened with you?
No, he's not. He's incredibly smart. So he's an engineer, and now he works in the health service. But no, he's not entrepreneurial, and he's quite happy. Some people are not, and some people aren't. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So tell me, when you were doing your private label brand and before you sold it, what do you think was the biggest thing that you struggled with? Like, what was your biggest failure? The moment where you were like, I've got to turn this around. I got to do something different to make sure that this will continue on or carry on or keep working.
Ooh. There were a few bumps in the road. The first one was before I had even sold a product. You see, because I went about this, you got to remember, right? This was early 2016, still very much Amazon gold rush of like, oh my God, third-party selling on Amazon, sell stuff and make a quick buck, right? I hadn't come from it from that point of view. I only became aware of that after I'd started developing my product and my first product and my brand. I wanted to create a fitness brand, and I didn't even know that third-party selling on Amazon was a thing. I just knew that I had to sell it on the internet, probably on my own website. And then doing some Googling around, I found out that normal people like me could sell their products on Amazon.
Yeah.
And it was in the process of researching all this that I came across all this stuff about picking a product to sell on Amazon. which for me is the wrong way of doing things, right? And I started to doubt myself. I was like, oh no, I've picked the wrong product. I picked a dud. And so even before I'd even launched, I was thinking about rapidly selling through my inventory on the first order, which was on a ship and on its way over from China to the UK.
Right.
And picking something else. I'm so glad that I didn't, because I shouldn't have doubted myself. My gut was right. I was supposed to build a brand that I was passionate about rather than just sell stuff. Definitely. So I guess that was the first one. And I got over that pretty quickly because, I sold through my first order and it was a great success. There were a few bumps on the road. There was a time that a huge organization tried to sue me out of existence.
Oh my goodness.
You want to hear about that?
I would love to hear about this.
All right, cool. So several products in, I had developed and patented. It was actually protected by something called a design registration, but we don't really, that's more of a European thing than a US thing. So for the purposes of most of the audience being in the US, we'll just say that I patented it. With a patent as opposed to a utility patent. Anyway, I developed this fitness product whose purpose was to widen barbells and dumbbells, make the bar thicker, therefore making the exercise more challenging. And until then, a much larger competitor had existed for maybe 2 decades, pretty much unchallenged. And they were ripping off the customer. I knew they were sourcing these products for a few bucks and they were selling them for like 50. And my product was actually a better product, right? I had deliberately designed a better product, but I wasn't stupid. I'd worked with a top intellectual property attorney to make sure that I wasn't infringing on anyone else's intellectual property and that I protected my own intellectual property. So brought it to market and sold it much cheaper than the competitor, but still making plenty of profit for me. So naturally, my product is on the way to becoming the market leader because it's better and cheaper. Win-win for customers. And then one day I get this letter in the mail. Well, tell a lie, no. One day my product gets suspended, first of all on Amazon Germany, and then very quickly afterwards across the rest of the European marketplaces. And a day or two later follows a letter in the mail in German. This was really interesting, thinks I. So I knew that it was, I could tell, I did a quick bit of Google translating that this was related to intellectual property. And I presented it to my attorney, my intellectual property attorney. And basically what happened was this. The organization which owned the competitor had decided that because I was selling in Germany, they would go through German lawyers in German to make my life as difficult as possible, knowing that I was a one-man operator on a laptop in a spare room who didn't speak German. And they clearly had experience, you could tell by the letters, of doing this before and suing other small businesses out of existence. And they basically said, look, we've had you suspended on Amazon, and if you don't stop selling, we're going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. And of course, Amazon shoots first and asks questions later. So they just suspended me without even checking if their claims were true. Fortunately, my awesome design attorneys took a week or two to thoroughly do all the research and check everything was as we thought it was. And we discovered a couple of things. What we already knew was true was I wasn't infringing on their patent. 2, that my own patent did protect my product sufficiently. But 3, and this is the hilarious part, the organization which owned that brand had purchased that brand, maybe, I don't know, 10 years before, from an entrepreneur just like me. Only that guy had done his patent on the cheap. And so the drawings for his patent were really poor. So poor, in fact, that they didn't actually protect his own product.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so this is what gave us the leverage. So we went back to them and said, look, 1, Ben's part is not infringing on your intellectual property because ABC. 2, you might want to know that your product is not actually protected by the drawings in your own patent. So we're not going to do anything about it, provided you leave Ben alone. But if you don't leave Ben alone and have Amazon reinstate the products, we're going to go to the whatever court it was and have your patent invalidated, which will be published publicly and will then open the whole market up. And you'll be in a pickle. So you can either coexist with Ben or not. And of course, they went away with their tails between their legs. I tried to sue them to get recover the fees that I lost from being suspended on Amazon, and to recover my legal costs. I never got that back from them. They just kind of disappeared without a word. But the satisfaction of winning was phenomenal. And my product, of course, continued to become the leader in that space. So
that's amazing.
That was a big, scary bump in the road.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, yeah, please continue.
Because I was just going to say, is I could tell that they had history of doing this, right? It was clearly a very well rehearsed thing that they were doing. And so what they wanted me to do was what they'd done to others, was just basically get scared by their scary letters and stop selling. And because I knew that I'd done the work beforehand in terms of the intellectual property, I knew that I'd be all right. And so I guess that's the takeaway message for anyone listening is, I think bootstrapping your business is great fun. Doing things on the cheap is kind of what you need to do when you're starting out.
Oh, for sure.
But if you're going to spend money on anything, intellectual property all the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think, there's so much, there's so many ways that can come back to you if you don't do that the right way. But I think, what's really interesting about your story is, there's so many different ways to go about doing a thing. And I know, like, especially when a company is relying on just their ability to bully other people out of their competitor space, like that, they must be missing something else. They're lacking something else, whether it's with their product, their service, their, maybe it's just their drive and ambition to do a product and a service or something really well. Maybe, I'm not sure, but I think if they're doing that kind of stuff, there's maybe something missing in that drive or the fun that comes from being an entrepreneur,
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the things that they were missing, apart from their product not being as good as mine, is that because the brand was now owned by a large or a very, very large organization, they had become a lumbering cruise ship. Whereas the most successful people, particularly on Amazon, are nimble little speedboats.
Yeah.
So they were missing all the little nimble, agile things that we can do through social media, through email marketing, through chatbots, whatever it is. And they were just relying on the fact that they launched this product, in the early 2000s, I would say. And it became quite acclaimed through, the .com boom and all that kind of stuff, and selling directly through gyms and whatnot. And so they were relying on that kind of old school reputation to carry it through. And then as soon as competitors came along, rather than say, oh, we got competition, we need to up our game now and come out with, better, different products, etc., they just decided, no, we're just going to bully you out of business. And actually, it didn't work for them. So
good for you, and good for standing up for yourself. I think that's so important, to not let people just roll over you and not react or try to pivot based out of fear. Do it based on what's good for you, what's good for your customers, what's good for your business and your families. I think that's the best way to react. So I think you did an excellent job, and look where you are now.
yeah, it went pretty well.
So okay, well, I think that takes us now to where you are today. Do you want to talk a little bit about eCom brokers and how you kind of transitioned into that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm still building brands now, and that's important because A, I enjoy it, and B, I've learned how to develop a brand, turn it into something valuable and sell it. But C is, if I'm going to help people exit their business, I need to have an understanding of what it's like to be them, to be an e-commerce business owner. And it's not good enough to say, oh, well, I used to own an e-commerce business, but I sold it in 2019.
Right.
I need to be able to say, well, I still am one, because, the space is moving so fast.
Yeah.
So when I sold the first business, I sold it through a broker. And that broker, I was recommended by a friend. And to be fair, they'd done a decent job for my friend, but their friend's business, with the benefit of hindsight, was significantly different to mine. So I went with this broker, and my experience was really poor. There was mistakes that they made along the way that would have significantly undervalued the business had we not, me and my accountant, not picked up on them.
Oh, wow.
And the process took far too long. And the people handling the deal probably weren't sufficiently qualified in terms of the accounting side of things. So at the end of the process, after my accountant, Allison, had kind of saved the day, tidied up their mess, and I'd negotiated down their commission based on us fixing it for them, we did the natural thing you do when you see a gap in the market. We said to each other, well, there's an opportunity here to do a better job. So we combined our skill sets, me on the e-commerce side, understanding what it is to live and breathe an e-commerce brand, take products to market them, and then everything in between, whether it's email marketing or listing optimization, whatever. And then Allison on the financial side, she's a chartered accountant, and she's got about 20 years mergers and acquisitions experience. By combining those skill sets, we were able to give sellers a better experience of a bespoke, thorough service to understand your business, both from a numbers point of view, but also an operational point of view, maximize the value of it, take it to market to a pool of the right buyers, and then crucially get you the best possible deal and the best possible deal structure through what we do, and then our partnerships with mergers and acquisitions attorneys. And so that's what we do. We're ecom brokers, and we help business owners plan, strategize, and execute the best possible exit that they can have. And some people come to us and they say, what's my business worth? And we say, well, it's worth in the region of, it's worth in the region of $500,000. And they'll say, I didn't want to sell it for less than $1 million. And we'll say, well, here are the things that you can do that would get you there in X amount of time. And for some of them, it's a case of off they go and they'll come back when they're ready. And for some of them, it's actually a case of we'll kind of mentor them on a route to an exit.
I see.
Helping them knock down those dominoes that they've stacked up, and then keeping a constant track on what the business is worth, and when they're ready, pull the trigger and go to market. And for other people, they just want to know what their business is worth. They don't want to sell it for quite some time, but they want to have an understanding of, they want a reference point, like, where am I? What is my business worth? And then what are the things that I can do over the next, 9 months, 24 months, whatever it might be, to get me to where I want to be. And other people want to sell their business very quickly. And, we'll help them to do that as well. And that's probably the majority of people at the moment.
I think, especially in the current climate with exits, I think you're right about that.
Yeah. So I have to deliver quite a lot of bad news too, because of the excitement among people of how much money is pouring into this space, and some of the myths that are floating around. I do get people come to me who say, I want to sell my business for 7 figures, and I have to deliver some bad news. And they say, but Thrasio. And I'm like, well, but nothing. Unfortunately, your business is not worth 7 figures. But other people, are selling their businesses for 8 figures. And it's a really exciting space to be in at the moment.
It really is. And I really love just kind of seeing how the different pieces shift a little bit. And I think, for some people it's scary. I think that's why, sometimes the bullies come out and they kind of jump on their competitors and stuff like that, because it can be scary when you start to see the pieces shifting. You have certain, versions of things, how they begin, and the, version 1, version 2, that looks a certain way because it fits the space at that time. But as the space grows, as the different services, as the different products, as Amazon continues to grow and evolve, each of those pieces continue to shift around. And I think that that's a really important thing to keep your eye on. And especially as we're watching that with the different aggregators, the brokers, all that kind of stuff, it's going to be interesting to continue to watch and to be in this space while all of this is taking place. I think we're in a unique position.
Yeah, I mean, so much has changed since. So Thrasio came to exist in September 2018, and they were pretty much the trailblazers in terms of specifically raising money to aggregate e-commerce brands. And now there's probably 100 dedicated e-commerce aggregators, so to speak. But the next 9, 12, 18 months is going to be fascinating, because probably 80% of the current aggregators will disappear in their current form, either into nothingness or they'll be swallowed up by larger aggregators. And of the 20% who survive, about half of them will survive because they're good. So they're good operators. And that's mostly the newer ones, because when all this kicked off, Investors were happy to put their money into it because the business model seemed very simple, right? Amazon is growing at, whatever percent a year, a lot. Roll up these brands. They're really easy to operate. Amazon handles the fulfillment and the customer service, and it will simply grow, and we'll make tons of money. But they've quickly realized that actually these brands are not that easy to operate, and the entrepreneurs behind them are putting in a lot of hard work. And so now the newer aggregators, to get their money, they've had to demonstrate to the investors that they actually do have operational capability. So of the 20% who survive, about half are pretty good operators, and about half are not good operators, but they will still survive because of two things. One is the hammer that they're using to hammer the square peg into the round hole is so big that they just can't fail. And the other is the brands that they have bought, they have bought really well. The brands that they have bought are continuing to do well, not because the aggregators are doing a good job with them, but in spite of the aggregator. So the original founders got that flywheel moving so well that the momentum is still with that brand and carrying it forward. So they're going to be okay. So what happens in the next, 9, 12, 18 months is going to be fascinating, because when that 80% dies, it's going to be a huge gap. Something's going to have to fill that gap. And that will be big boy mature private equity who've been running brands for decades. And they've been sitting on their hands for the last 18, 24 months saying, well, what's going to happen here? If you like, the original aggregators were the canary in the coal mine, testing everything out. And the mature brand operators from more traditional private equity have been waiting, and they're going to come in, and this space is going to get cleaned up, which is great for sellers, because a lot of the dodgy stuff that's going on with the aggregators right now in terms of the mergers and acquisitions strategy that they have will disappear, and a more mature, probably more ethical experience with mature brand operators is going to come in. So it's going to be exciting.
Amazing. I want to just take a moment to thank you. I really appreciate you jumping on this podcast today and talking about your entrepreneurial journey, how you use your influences from life, from family, from past jobs and stuff to bring you where you are today. And is there anything else you want to leave with our listeners before we wrap this up today?
Make sure you plan ahead. Find out now what your business is worth so that you have a reference point. Otherwise you're trekking through the jungle without a map or a compass, and you have no idea where you are. So even if you've never considered an exit, there's going to have to be an end game one day, 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the line. What do you want to be doing with your life? Do you still want to be running this business? How might your industry have changed regulation wise, competition wise, technology wise? So think about that. So if you want to have a chat with us to find out where your business might be worth, we're happy to help. Our website is ecombrokers.co.uk. It's a UK domain, but we're working all over the place. You can drop me an email, which is just ben@ecombrokers.co.uk. And I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to help.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ben. Appreciate your time today. And thank you guys. We will see you next week on the next episode of Amaze on Stream. Take care, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.